So much has happened with China and the BRICS nations, and now there are some people out there saying France wants to join the BRICS. Can you believe it? Well, I'm about to show you the real information. I'll give all of the data you need to know right here. Let's begin. You came here for the truth, so let me unveil that for you. Imagine France joining the BRICS. Now, this would be significant, just like Canada and Mexico and other names you may have heard. But in this video today, I'm going to show you what's true and what's not. The very first thing is this: Euro area trade with Russia. You could see as of the invasion of Ukraine, this has declined both on the imports and the exports, as you would imagine. Now, this has declined by about half. The European, different countries had said they want to reduce their dependence on Russia, and so they have tried to do that. It's going to be a little bit sticky in the wintertime as we see, will they be able to actually refill their supplies and stockpiles over the summertime? And that will largely be fed by the United States. That's where a lot of the inflationary pressure has come from. Now, if you look at what's happening here geopolitically, Europe is standing in the middle of what's going on with China and the United States. Europe is saying, we desperately need China, and we can't do what the US does. US can be more self-sufficient. Europe can't do that. So Europe doesn't want to basically shy away from the US, but they also don't want to step on any toes of China. And so we see this right now. Literally, they are in the middle, in a sense, geographically, but at the same time, politically as well. That brings me to my next point. You probably have heard the news out there. France wants to join the BRICS. Did you? Well, it sure gets a lot of clicks, let me tell you. But let me show you the actual real information. Europe must resist pressure to become America's followers, says Macron. The great risk Europe faces is getting caught up in crises that are not ours, French President says in an interview. So this comes out of Political, and I want to show you what the actual quotes were. It's important that we look at what is real and not what is there to get clicks. You got to understand this. You're hearing it everywhere. France joining the BRICS. Videos that are getting hundreds of thousands of views in a matter of days are titled this. Europe must reduce its dependence on the United States, avoiding getting dragged into confrontation between China and the US over Taiwan. Of course, they're saying this at a time when the tensions are heated more now than ever before. So here he's talking about strategic autonomy for Europe, presumably led by France, to become a third superpower. He said the great risk Europe faces is getting caught up in the crises that are not ours, which prevents it from building its strategic autonomy. And of course, this comes at a time in which China and France have been, let's say, relations are better, for lack of a better word there. The paradox would be that, overcome with panic, we believe we are just America's followers. The questions Europeans need to answer is it in our interest to accelerate a crisis on Taiwan? No. The worst thing would be to think that we Europeans must become followers on this topic and take a cue from the United States agenda and a Chinese overreaction. So there he is, saying we don't want a part of this. If the US is going to go to war over Taiwan, we do not want to deal with it. Important stuff. Okay? Stability in the Taiwan Strait is of paramount importance, according to the European Commission president. The threat of the use of force to change the status quo is unacceptable. Okay? So Europe is basically saying that they do not want to have what the US is essentially standing for. They don't want to deal with that. And that is very big news right here. But did France say they want to join the BRICS? No. France didn't say that. Macron didn't say that. These are the quotes. I just read them all to you. But does it look likely that France wants to buddy up with China? Wants to do more deals with China? wants to expand what they have. I talked about it in a video just recently. Yes, absolutely. So we got to realize what's true and what's exaggerated. Okay, now maybe there will be a day when they do join the BRICS nations, but that's not now, and that wasn't said. We need to make that clear. This is another important fact. If you look at what's happening with China and the rest of the BRICS nations, there's an expansion. They are buddying up, cozying up more than ever before. Lula backs BRICS currency to replace dollar in foreign trade. He spoke after visiting headquarters of the BRICS Bank in Shanghai. Brazil president has a bilateral meeting with the leader of China. And this is a quote, actually, I thought it was interesting. Why can't institutions like the BRICS Bank have a currency to finance trade relations between Brazil and China, between Brazil and all the other BRICS countries? Who decided that the dollar was the trade currency after the end of the gold parity, right? And then he also said this: the advantage is to avoid the straitjacket imposed by necessarily having trade operations settled in a currency that is not involved in the transaction. That's exactly something that we should be thinking about. There was a time for that. There was a time to use the US dollar. It was the most steady, it was the most stable, it was accepted all around the world. But today, you've got sanctions on different countries, you've got problems in these other countries, and they're basically saying, whether it's Russia, whether it's China and others, they're saying, look, I want to do business with that country. And the US is saying, no, you can't do that. And if you do, we're going to make problems for you. At the same time, they might be saying, my currency is weak, their currency is weak. Why am I going to go out there, buy a strong currency like the US dollar, only to then give that back to that other country? It doesn't make sense. And that's what they're doing here. That's what we're seeing. This is so key. It's of importance for everybody, even if you only earn US dollar and only are dealing with US dollars on the whole. It will affect everybody, and it has already. Brazil's Lula in Shanghai on visit to boost ties with China. Very important stuff. They're boosting ties with the South American giant's biggest trade partner, winning political supports and attempts to mediate the conflict in Ukraine. Big stuff. So I read through this, basically just trying to show how they are really growing their ties in between them. They're talking about the BRICS nations. And I thought it was interesting. You could see here, Lula will also attend the official swearing in of close advisor and former Brazilian President Dilma Rousseff as head of the China-backed New Development Bank. So it is very clear that these two countries, China and Brazil specifically, are really closing in their ties. It's not just China and Russia. This is important. So all of these nations are gathering together. Look at what happened with Saudi Arabia. Understand the importance of that as well. Each and every piece of this puzzle is coming together, and the US dollar is at risk. The very first thing that you should be aware of is that the strength of the US dollar looks to be weakened over the long term. Not short term, but the long term. What does that mean for you? Well, in my opinion, I would start to learn to increase my income, but not in just US dollars. If you could earn that in multiple currencies, that would be beneficial to you. At the same time, you want to hold money outside of the traditional US dollar controlled financial world, if possible. You also want to have real assets, because all of these things can translate and could potentially be moved outside of largely their control or oversight and so on, okay? Then we have the next aspect, which is just trying to highlight the fact that China has their own issues. It's not as if China's this great superpower and, no matter what happens, everything's going to be great, it's going to be fine and dandy. No, absolutely not. They have several issues, and I've talked about that at length. In particular, what's going on with their housing. China puts pressure on Intel as US sanctions loom, seeks Intel's support for preserving the global supply chain. Really good stuff in this article, because it essentially says here, in a meeting with Beijing, the CEO of Intel, said that multinational companies need to overcome, this is basically the one individual, the China's vice president, telling Intel basically they need to overcome difficulties and challenges to promote better global cooperation. And they're basically saying, look, don't go with what the US is saying, don't deal with that. We need to have deals. We need to make business happen. And the US is putting their pressure, Netherlands and Japan as well. They're all trying to shut China out of the latest and greatest technology when it comes to semiconductors. So we'll see what happens. China is a very big consumer, and a company like Intel, just like all these other semiconductor manufacturers, if they lose the market in China, their company is going to get squashed. So if you are invested in semiconductors, be mindful of this. Very important stuff here as an investor. China's cities are buried in debt, but they keep shoveling it on. China has long pursued growth by public spending even after the payoff has faded. Cities stuck with the bill are still spending and cutting essential services. That connects in with this. China's central government is borrowing at the fastest pace on record. Government is selling bonds to finance spending and spur growth. That should help ease the debt burden of local governments. So they've got issues. They've got real estate issues. They've got debt issues. And of course, they have tensions brewing just about everywhere, it seems. But what is the solution? Of course, they could always print more money, right? Well, apparently that's not so profitable anymore. Look at this, just a little bit of humor to finish off. The world's largest banknote printer says printing money isn't that profitable anymore. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. I mean, you just can't. Printing money isn't profitable. And I'm just trying to make a joke about it, but it shows us what has happened to the value of the currency. The value continues to decline. If you save and if you try to do things the traditional way, you're going to lose out. If you spend your time watching nonsense, scrolling through nonsense, even going down the rabbit hole. I know that. I did that years ago. I went way down the rabbit hole. I spent hours and hours and hours a day. But that didn't get me to where I needed to be in terms of my goals. It made me more knowledgeable. Sure, I don't regret reading anything. However, that focus needs to be really attained, because if you don't have that, you can go there's an unlimited amount of books you can read, unlimited amount of documentaries and all these different things. But what is your goal? First, assess the goal and then go towards it. If you don't assess the goal, you can never get there, okay? So that's the video for today. Let me know what you think, and if you saw other videos being created out there about France and the BRICS and what I brought to you today, does that give you some additional info? Let me know in the comments below. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care.